Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be taking the political compass test and just showing you guys what I'm thinking on each question and ultimately what my results are, just so you guys know a little more about where I come from with most issues. So let's get right into it. So the first question is, if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. So this question to me, when I've taken this test in the past, it's always kind of confused me because ultimately what I think when on this question is fairly nuanced, and I think ultimately economic globalization will serve humanity and it'll be great for humanity. However, who will it primarily serve? I think primarily it'll serve transnational corporations who are owned by people who are expanding globally. And I think that actually should be their primary motivation when they're expanding their companies. It shouldn't be, as an objectivist, I believe that these companies should be expanding for their own profit maximization, not for improving the rest of humanity. I think, because I believe in rational egoism, I think people should ultimately do things for themselves, do things for their own interest. So I think that's ultimately why these transnational corporations should globalize, so that their owners and their stockholders can make more of a profit. So I do think, while I think it does serve humanity incredibly well, economic globalization is amazing for humanity because of cheaper prices and trade and all that good stuff. I think ultimately it will primarily serve transnational corporations, and that's probably the ethical thing about it. So I'm going to disagree with this, but not strongly disagree, because I do think it will serve humanity, and I think that's a very good function of it. So this next question, I always support my country whether it was right or wrong. I am not a nationalist, so I would strongly disagree with this. I think if my country's wrong, I'm going to critique it, and ultimately my country is here to serve me, to protect my rights. No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. That's a tough one. I think it's okay to be proud of your country because of the values that it represents, and just to be like patriotic to an extent. But I don't think you need to I don't think feeling pride in your country is necessarily a valid thing. Although I think I probably would disagree with this. I think I probably would think that it's okay to be proud of your country just for the values that it represents. Depending on what country you're from, though, I think there's some places where you definitely should not be proud of your country. It just basically depends on the ideas. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. I am not a racist, so I am going to strongly disagree with this. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm going to disagree with this one. Not strongly disagree. So my thoughts on this one would be just the idea that just because someone doesn't like who your enemy is doesn't mean that they support the same values that you do. Actually, I might strongly disagree with this. I think we shouldn't be close allies with, think back to World War II for an example. I don't think we should have been favorable towards the Soviets so that we could crush Germany. Although I think we ultimately did that, I don't think we should have been as favorable towards them as we were. And it's the same thing with most international conflicts. I don't think you should ally yourself with a terrible regime with terrible ideas just so that you can crush who you view as the enemy. Because ultimately, both of them are your enemy because they go against the values of your country. So yeah. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. I mean, I have to agree with that because I think ultimately, if you need to defend yourself, you have to do that by all means necessary. as a country. That's your duty to your citizens, is to defend your citizens by all means necessary. So yeah, defend your citizens' rights by whatever means are necessary. And sometimes that might go against international law, and I'm not sure I'm a big fan necessarily of international agreements. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Strongly disagree. I am a big fan of capitalism and how they make information more entertaining and just appealing to people, and it makes people, usually actually makes them more informed, because if your information's entertaining, you're more likely to be informed. So next page. People are ultimately more divided by class than by nationality. I'd say that's probably true. Although this is more of just a statement of like what the fact is. I think most conflicts are ultimately more based off class than based off nationality, and because like the classes are closer together and like different nations are separated by borders. I think I'm not sure. This is a weird question to me. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I would say control neither one of them. I mean, I don't see any reason for the government to control the economy. Although I do think inflation is a fairly dangerous thing, because it makes it so that the money that you do get is less valuable and you can buy less things with it. And unemployment is not necessarily as negative, because there's reasons why people are unemployed that's okay, and all this sort of things. But so ultimately I'd say controlling inflation would probably be more important, but I'm not going to strongly agree because I'm not a big fan of controlling the economy. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Strongly disagree. Yeah, corporations, their job is to make money, to make us better off. They're going to protect the environment if it's in their interest to, but they don't need to. Like they also can't, they're not going to pollute the environment in an ideal society if everybody owns property, so they can only pollute in certain places. And I don't see any reason why they're going to destroy the environment entirely. Plus, I do think the environment is here for, like, human beings need to use the environment to best suit our needs. So I think it's good that corporations are exploiting the environment to an extent to improve human life. Human life is more important than the environment. Anyone who disagrees with that is anti-human. That was a pretty inflammatory statement, but it's kind of true. From each according to his ability to each according to his need. That's just straight communism. So strongly disagree. I think ultimately you should get to keep what you produce. If you produce something, that's yours. You're entitled to the results of your thoughts, the results of your actions. That's basic property rights. But to say from each according to his ability to each according to his need, I'd say to each according to his need is the key phrase here, because it's saying that you have the right to take from some people and give it to other people, which I am fundamentally opposed to. It's a sad reflection in our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. Strongly disagree. I think capitalism will lower prices of water. It'll make it more accessible to people, and by making it bottled and branded, it makes it also accessible to more people. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Strongly disagree. What happens if land isn't a commodity to be bought and sold? That means everyone owns it, and that's tragedy of the commons, and we're just going to destroy the land. And ultimately, I do think people should have the right to own land to improve their own lives and all that sort of good stuff. It's regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society. I don't know who those people are, but I think I know who they're trying to refer to. I think they're referring to bankers and financiers who actually contribute quite a bit to society by investing in businesses and um, helping people take out loans so that they can start their own businesses and compete in a market. But I guess you guys just like to have the same businesses in power. Or I shouldn't say you guys. The person, whoever agrees with the statement, likes to just have the same powerful businesses in power all the time because they don't want people to be able to take out loans from banks and create their own. But okay, to each their own. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I don't think that. So if this is referring to tariffs, I don't think we need to punish our own citizens for something that another country is doing. Protectionism is sometimes necessary. I'm gonna disagree with that, but not strongly disagree, because I do see the case for sometimes possibly embargoing people. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver profit to its shareholders. Strongly agree. That's a moral conviction. It's just the idea that if you have a company, your only real obligation with that is to make your own life better. That's why you created the company. That's basically the ethical standard. Because if not, you're basically being asked to sacrifice your life and your happiness for other people, which I fundamentally disagree with. The rich are too highly taxed. Strongly, everyone's too highly taxed. Taxation is theft. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Strongly agree, because I think medical care is something that must be provided by somebody. To say that everybody has access, or everybody, regardless of ability to pay, has access to something that is produced by another person, is to advocate a really damaging ideology, because these people are producing it to make their own life. People are producing medical care to make their own lives better. They want to make a profit on this stuff. But to say that you as a medical care provider have a duty to provide to everyone, it's disincentivizing people from producing it, and it's just what I view to be an immoral way of looking at things, because you're asking somebody to sacrifice their profits, their happiness, for another person, which I view as anti-life and anti-human. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. I agree. I think it depends what you mean by mislead here. That's why I'm not strongly agreeing. But I think if a company is lying about their product and someone purchases it based off a lie, that's essentially them stealing money from the person, because the person did not agree to what they bought. They didn't agree to they agreed to what they were told they were going to buy, but that's not objectively not what they bought. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. I would disagree with that. Monopolies are impossible in a free market. And just to say, if a company is too big, we're going to break it up. How do you define what too big is? It's a very arbitrary distinction. And yeah, I don't think it's possible to create a monopoly in the free market, because there's always a chance for a competitor. And there's always a chance that people stop buying your product if you're doing things incorrectly. The freer the market, the freer the people. I think that's generally true, because if a market is just the economy, and like saying that people are allowed to think for themselves and produce for themselves. So I think it's probably true that a freer market leads to freer people, but we also do have examples of a very free market where people's rights generally aren't respected. Just look to Pinochet in Chile. Wasn't a very good situation there for free people. Abortion, when a woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Strongly disagree. I think abortion should be legal. I think women have the right to choose what they do with this fetus in their womb if it's not alive. I don't think it's a separate human life at that point. All authority should be questioned. I strongly agree. I don't think you should just submit to any authority. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I'd probably agree with that. That's essentially just justice, giving people I think that's just giving people what they deserve, essentially. I think there's other connotations with it. I'm not necessarily sure what those are. I'm just going to agree with that one. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums. I strongly agree. If there's not an actual demand for something, you shouldn't shift things away from that could be spent on things that people actually want towards things that people don't necessarily want. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Yeah, I don't really care. I think schools would be better run privately anyways, and it just depends on the school in that context. All people have their rights, but it's better for us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. As a non-racist, I personally believe that all people have the same rights, known as human rights. I don't think there's different types of humans, so I don't think there's different types of rights. I'm coughing a lot, sorry guys. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Not a big fan of child abuse, but I do think that to some extent it might be necessary. I don't know. I could never see myself spanking a child. That just seems, I don't know. I get it in the context of like discipline, but I personally would not feel comfortable hitting a kid. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Sure, I mean, you don't have to tell your parents everything. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Strongly agree. And I think also possessing cocaine for personal use should not be a personal offense, or heroin, or anything really, as long as it's not something that's directly linked to violence. Because I think there's some things that that are directly linked to violence or necessarily will lead to death. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. I don't know if there necessarily needs to be a function of schooling, but I probably would agree with this. I think there's other. I don't think we need to define a function of schooling. I think that's up to businesses to decide, but or school businesses or schools to decide, but yeah, I think there should probably be something more to school than to equip the future generation to find jobs. But I think job finding is a very important role of schooling. People with serious inheritable diseases should not be allowed to reproduce. That's kind of eugenics. I think people, regardless of what, I think as long as they're not lying about it to whoever they're having sex with, then I think it's okay. I mean, I don't think we should restrict people from finding happiness. And sex is a very important part of happiness, or relationships. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. Disagree. I don't think that's strong. That's definitely not the most important thing. The most important thing would be just to learn how to think for yourself. There are no savage or civilized peoples. There's only different cultures. No savage or civilized peoples. I think nobody's inherently savage or civilized, but I do think some cultures are more savage than others. So maybe that's what the question is saying. I think it's referring to there are no savage or civilized like cultures, and I think that's what that question is referring to. So I'd probably disagree with that, but I'm not going to strongly disagree because I'm not entirely sure. For those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I would definitely agree with that. I think if you can work and you're not doing it, if you can support yourself, you shouldn't expect other people to give you to make you survive. That's essentially just parasitism. That's just living off of other people's wealth and not expecting to do your own. You have to take responsibility for your own life. Although I do think there are some people who unjustly became poor that I think we should give money to, because I'm not a big fan of people unjustly being poor. When you're troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I strongly disagree. I think you need to confront your emotions head on and try to overcome them and correct them, and check just where they ultimately stem from, and question that premise that they stem from, and all that sort of stuff. I've probably talked about that in other videos. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. I'd strongly disagree. I have a bunch of friends who are first generation immigrants, and they are very integrated. What's good for the most successful corporations is ultimately good for all of us. I would strongly agree, because those corporations, to make a profit, they have to produce a product that we want to exchange value for value for. So ultimately, that is in our best interest. No public broadcasting institution should, however independent its content should receive public funding. I strongly agree with that. I don't think anyone should receive public funding, because what it does is it takes money from consumers that would ultimately be spent on something that they want more. It takes that money and shifts it to something that they want less, which I fundamentally disagree with. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Strongly agree with that. I mean, just look at Edward Snowden, what he found on. They're fucking spying on us, so. Hey, government. You spying on me? How you doing? Yeah, they're spying on us at all times. That shit's a little annoying. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. I don't agree with that. I don't like the idea of one person controlling everything. I'm not a big fan of democracy either, because that's just two wolves and a sheep voting on who to eat for dinner, and it's fairly dangerous. But yeah, I definitely prefer democracy to dictatorship. Though the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only the wrongdoers need to be worried. I think we should all be worried, because the government's listening to everything I'm saying right now. Fuck the government. Hey, did you guys hear that? Someone say anything? Oh, fuck. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I hope the government didn't hear my anti-government sentiments, but whatever. Yeah, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Strongly disagree. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. This is a long-ass fucking video. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. I would disagree with that. I don't think we can ever. I think it makes sense in the sense of justice, and people lose their rights when they commit a crime, but I think. That's a hard question. I don't think we can necessarily be 100% certain that someone committed a crime, so I don't think the death penalty should be an option. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. I would disagree with that. You don't need to command people in a society. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Art has to represent something, dog. That doesn't make... Yeah, that's not art if it doesn't represent anything. Or, hold up. Sorry, strongly agree. There we go. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. What should we focus on? I'd probably agree with that, because I think that's, like, the purpose is more justice, rather than getting them back out into society, because you can't always necessarily save a criminal. But yeah, waste. I would probably agree with that. I think some people can be rehabilitated. That's kind of what ties into the last one too. The business person and manufacturer are more important than the writer or the artist. I would disagree. I think they're equally important, but it's different realms of stuff. These are more spiritual values, and these are more material values. So I definitely think each has their role. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers, and mothers don't have a duty to do anything. They're human beings whose only duty, so to speak, is to bring their own happiness. Or to strive for their own happiness. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. Not really. I mean, by expanding to these developing countries, they're bringing them more wealth and bringing them more products that they wouldn't have anyway. So I would strongly disagree. Global capitalism raises developing countries out of poverty. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. I guess I'm not really at peace with the establishment, so I guess I'm not mature yet. Oh God, arbitrary. Astrology is completely arbitrary. It's just whatever the fuck people want to say. It's a lot of bullshit. You cannot be moral without being religious. I don't know. I'm pretty moral. Not very religious. Oh shit. Certainly disagree. Yeah, that's basically Ayn Rand's ethics. That tells you can be moral without being religious. That's a big part of it. I would not have converted away from religion if I didn't see another objective morality out there. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. Yes, because I'm just gonna pretend like this is just welfare in general. Welfare in general, it applies to everybody, including the wife-beating drunks and the people who just want to parasite off of society. Charity, you can target that shit and focus on the people who actually became poor through unjust means. Some people are naturally unlucky. Strongly disagree. That's completely arbitrary. Maybe you have more unluck than luck, but that doesn't mean it's natural. It's important that I'm not religious, so I don't really give a fuck about religious values. Sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. Ooh. I would disagree with that because I think sex outside of marriage is not necessarily immoral. I think it can be very moral, but I think promiscuous sex is wrong, and a lot of people engage in that. So I'm not going to strongly disagree, but I think sex outside of marriage is a pretty good thing. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Sure, they have the same rights as anyone else. The government should not interfere in their lives. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be illegal for the adult population. Sure, man. I feel like I don't know. I go back and forth on pornography. I obviously think it should be legal. But I do question whether or not it's necessarily moral to watch it, because I think ultimately you're taking pleasure from watching people engage in an immoral action, i.e. promiscuity. But I think it definitely should be legal. I think people have the right to make immoral choices as long as they're not interfering on the rights of others. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is absolutely. If that's the key word there. As long as they're consenting, I guess adults is key too, but I don't think children can consent. So I think consenting is the key word. As long as that shit's consensual, no one's rights are being violated. So it's no business of the state. They have no reason to be involved in that. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Strongly disagree. From my understanding of what homosexuality is, I think that shit is unchangeable, and I think it's not something that people necessarily choose to the same extent. And so I guess it's a somewhat natural thing. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I'm not sure. That's a tough question. I'd probably disagree with that. I think we've been way too non-open about sex in the past, and it's probably good that people are opening up more. Although I'm also opposed to promiscuity, and I think that's also become somewhat of a problem. But yeah, that's it. Now let's see where I stand. Oh, I bet I'm gonna be authoritarian left. Oh shit. Oh shit. Where am I? Where am I? Oh fuck. Oh shit. God damn it. Where is it? Hell yeah, baby. Hell yeah. Fuck the poor people. Fuck the. Nah, I'm playing. I'm okay with poor people. I'm a big money guy too. Hell yeah. Libertarian right. Hell yeah. The least dangerous extremists. These are the people who will just violently advocate, or not violently advocate, will aggressively advocate for non-aggression. Well, these people will throw a fucking Molotov through your window. These people will fucking run you over with a tank, and these people will genocide your ass. But big fan of libertarian right. Hell yeah, baby. Yeah, I'm not an anarchist though. That's one thing. I am an objectivist, so I kind of knew where I'd be already, but this was just more for you guys just to know where I'm at, and this is a fucking almost 32-minute video, but it's some good shit. So hell yeah, libertarian right, baby. Let me screenshot this boy real quick. There we go, and that is it. Let's look at the printable chart. Oh shit, that's not in the right screen. Yeah, there it is. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. This was a fun one, long ass video. Nobody's probably gonna watch the whole shit, but thank y'all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.